Welcome to the Challenge 7 Snake project video, where we're going to explain how to implement Challenge 7. So we have our random color generator, paint cell functions already made for us, and all we need to do is make an object that has an x and y coordinate, a random color, and then paint that random square. Alright? So we want to have x and y coordinates that are random. So again, it's going to look like this when we're done. Alright? So we're going to teach a little bit about the math.random function, how that actually works. So first let's make our square, and it's going to equal an object. Alright, that's the syntax for an object. And it's going to have an x coordinate, which is going to be a number, a y coordinate, that's going to be a number, and a string, that's going to be a color. Alright? So for the color, it's easy enough. All we're going to do is call this function, getRandomColor. Okay? Now, for the x and y coordinates, we need to get a random number between, let's see, we have 0, so that's a 0, 0 coordinate right there. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so basically we want 8 as our maximum number that we're going to have. Okay, so let's look at the documentation for math.random. So here's the basic function call. It's math.random with open and closing parentheses. So that's going to give you a number between 0 and 1. Okay, not including 1. Alright, so if we want you to be able to visualize this a little bit. So right here we have a calculator, graphing calculator that's online. So this is a random number between 0 and 1. Alright, so what all this is doing, all this math.random is doing, is going to give you a random number between 0 and 1. Now what you have to do to get it to your max is you have to multiply it by the maximum. If you think about it, if in worst case scenario, or the lowest case scenario, sorry, it's 0.0000, right? It's a 0. So 0 times your max is going to be equal to 0, right? So we're going to actually try this out a little bit. So we're going to set r for random equal to this random number, and we're going to start changing it around a little bit. So r times, let's put a variable m for max. Okay, so if our maximum number possible is 1, then it's going to return the exact same number, right? Because it's random number times 1. If our maximum is 10, then it's going to return a random number between 0 and 10, not including 10. So let's play around with these numbers a little bit. So if we have a 9 with a bunch of random things, then it's going to be 9 point something, right? If it's going to be a 0 with a bunch of zeros and then random numbers, it's going to be 0 point something. 2, it's going to be 2 point something, which makes sense because we're just multiplying by 10. But we can have any number that we want in here, right? 14, same deal. If we put enough 9s, it's eventually going to get to a 14, just because it's going to round up. Now, speaking of rounding, we want to see what happens when we round. Now, if you notice right here, there are two different methods to round. Well, there's three really. There's math.floor, math.ceiling, and math.round. Okay, so let's show you what all of those do. So right here we have some functions. We have ceiling, floor, oops, not right there, the floor, and then we're going to do round. Alright, so let's make this equal to a variable n, and then we're going to show you the difference between these rounding things. Okay, alright, so see, our maximum number is 14, a random, this is the maximum number that we want to be able to get. But we don't want these decimal points right here. So we want to round it so it's a nice whole number between 0 and 14. Okay, so there's a few ways to do that. There's, well, these three ways. So we can do a ceiling, round, or floor. So if we have 1 point something, our random number is 1.72777. So the ceiling will bring that number up to n, or sorry, up to the next whole number, which is 2. And then round will just round up to 2, and then floor basically cuts off any of the decimal points, and you'll always be at the next lowest integer, basically. Alright, say we are at, instead of 1 point something, say we're at 5 point something. Now you notice that the round has gone down to the floor. The floor just cuts off everything again, and then the ceiling basically always rounds up, no matter what the decimal place is. So there's a few different ways. Those are just basically the different methods for doing so. Now say 0 isn't the number that we want to get in between. Right here we have max minus min plus the minimum. Okay, so let's just see what that looks like. This is going to be inside parentheses, and this is going to be inside parentheses. Alright, so the max minus the min, and then plus the min again. Let's use a different one, sorry. Let's use J. Okay. So let's say the minimum is, so we want to get a random number between 10 and 14. You notice that 12 is between that, and then with our rounding, our ceiling, round, and floor, they're also between those numbers. Now if I want to include 14, I want to do a ceiling, or I could do a round. And if I don't want to include it, then I'll do a floor. So let's see what a 0.9 will give us. Alright, you see how that includes 14 at the top, and the floor goes down to 13. Let's see what 0.0s will give us. Alright, so the ceiling, in this case, it's not going to include the 10 and the lowest case scenario, because it always rounds up, even if it's a 10.0397, like that. And then the round will round as you typically round. So, long story short, what we would like to do, instead of doing a floor or a ceiling, let's just do a normal round function. That means that we'll be able to get the low values and the high values. Alright, so we'll be able to get our max and our min. Now, thinking about our coordinates, we want to get our numbers between 0 and 8, basically. Now, if 0 is our min, then really we don't need to put anything, right? Because subtracting 0 and adding 0, it doesn't change anything. It's always going to, it's always possible to get to one of those 0 spots. See? Right there. So the round gets all the way down to the 0. Alright? Okay, so what we're going to do is, let's do the math.random, and we're going to multiply by our max. Alright? So, remember the formula is max minus min plus min. Alright? So that would get us a number between the maximum and min that we want. However, because our minimum is 0, because the coordinate can be 0, 0, we really just need to multiply it by our max. Okay? So let's figure out a way to get our max. Again, it's actually pretty easy to find our max. It's just 8. But we don't want to hard code it because our cell size could change, our cell width. So we want to do something that is changeable and that uses variable names rather than hard numbers like that. Okay, so if we think about it, we have 450 pixels wide, right? But we don't want it to be this last 50 pixels, or this last cell width. We don't need to worry about, because we want to be on the other side of that cell width. So we'll take 450, or the width, minus 1 cell width. Okay? And if we divide that by our cell width, that's going to give us this number right here, which is an 8. Now let's just show you what that looks like. So our width is 450 minus our cell width, which is 50. That gives us 400, right? Now let's divide that by our cell width, which is 50, which gives us our 8. Alright? Perfect. So let's actually just code it up now. So times our width minus our cell width divided by our cell width. Okay? Now let's just copy that for the y coordinate, because it's the exact same except for it'll be for the height, which happens to be the same because it's a square. Now let's see what happens without the math.round function. Okay? Right here. Let's paint our square. How about that? Alright. Paint cell square. There we go. So it looks like we're getting squares all the way to the end and pretty much all the way to this side. Now, this doesn't look exactly like the other challenge, but that's because we haven't been rounding. So all these numbers are anywhere in between 0 and 8, but that's including decimal places. So that's what all these random squares are. Okay? So let's see what math.floor does first. Okay? Just want to show you the difference so that you can tell what happens. Alright. Okay. Alright, so now that we have a floor, it's always going to put it at the least square. So this eliminates all of the decimal places. However, you can see that we're missing the greatest number, which is 8. We don't have any 8s now. Okay, we don't have any 8s in the y position or the the y position or the x position. So let's see what ceiling does then. Alright. Alright, so it does pretty much the exact opposite. There are no things in the 0 position. Now, we could modify our code right here so that we have a different minimum value so that the ceiling could work. Alright, but to keep the code simple so that we have our minimum of 0 and our max of 8, we'll just do the round function. Okay. And there you go. We have the lowest x position as 0 and the greatest as 8 for both the x's and y's. And we have these random colors generating just like our objective. So that's challenge 7. I hope you were able to learn a little bit and kind of go a little bit further in depth of math.random, why it works and how it's working. Alright, so we'll see you in the next challenge, and good luck.